Welcome everyone to this Power Hour. Meet Aubrey Nation. So she's your guide to hormone harmony. And Aubrey Nation is a registered nurse, yoga teacher, and certified nutrigenomics practitioner, dedicated to helping women unlock their body's full potential with a deep understanding of functional genetic testing. She empowers women to achieve elevated energy, mental clarity, and optimal well-being by addressing their body's unique needs. Aubrey's journey began with the traditional health system, where she witnessed countless women being dismissed or misdiagnosed. Determined to make a difference, she stepped beyond the limitations of quick fixes and lifelong medications to focus on root cause healing. So, welcome to Hormone Harmony. In this transformative session, Aubrey will guide us through the essentials of understanding and balancing our hormones for better energy, mood, and long-term well-being. We'll gain practical tools to optimize your health, navigate conflicting health advice, and take control of our bodies without relying on unnecessary medication. So join us for an empowering hour of education, self-discovery, and a community support, all while contributing to Heart Place Hospital's life-changing mission. So thank you so much and welcome, Aubrey.
Thank you, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be here and with you wonderful ladies and sharing this information. I think there's so much noise about hormones out there in sort of the online space and from what I hear from clients. And so it's nice to be able to kind of dive into this topic. As Jackie said, welcome to Hormone Harmony. The session is all about trying to learn how to work with your hormones rather than work against them. So something I think that we can all agree on, and I obviously just said we've got access to a lot more information on what to do or what not to do for our hormones, yet most of us as women are still struggling with hormone-related symptoms, and I believe this is why. It is because we are not prioritizing the foundations that support our hormones to thrive. So we are going to turn that around today and chat about what your hormones actually are and what they do in our bodies. I'm going to take you through step by step what it looks like to optimize your hormones. And I'm going to talk about intentional and actionable strategies that you can use daily to start optimizing your hormones. All right, so as Jackie said, I am Aubrey. I'm a yoga teacher, a nutrigenomics practitioner, and a recovering registered nurse. I've seen a lot, as I'm sure Jackie can relate to. So I left traditional nursing after years of trying to fit a round peg, me, into a square hole, which is our healthcare system. And it looked a little bit like this, which was super frustrating for me. Jackie can probably, again, relate to this. Probably, unfortunately, a lot of you can relate to this meme as well. A little bit funny, but a little bit sad at the same time, right? So now, as Jackie mentioned, I've got a really strong focus on personalization, and I use something called functional genetic testing to help people understand their bodies and work with their unique physiology so they can reach peak well-being and live their lives at their highest and brightest selves. So let's dive into today's topic, and we'll start with what are hormones. So our hormones are our body's chemical messengers. They are produced by the glands in your body, like your thyroid, your adrenal glands, and your ovaries, and they travel throughout your bloodstream, delivering messages to different organs and tissues, telling them what to do, when to do it, and how much of it to do. The key hormones we're going to chat about today are cortisol, which most of us are probably quite familiar with. So cortisol is our stress hormone, helping you react to stressful situations, but it also plays a role in your metabolism and in your immune function. We're going to talk about insulin. So this is the hormone that helps to regulate our blood sugar and our energy storage, and it really is there to help keep our energy levels steady. Ones that we're all probably very familiar with: estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So our sex hormones. These control our reproductive health, our mood, and our energy levels. And yes, ladies, testosterone isn't just for the males. We also have it too. Leptin. This is a hormone that not many people have heard of, but it is known as our satiety hormone, and that tells your brain when you're full, and it also helps to kind of regulate our energy balance. So, too much of it or too little can affect your appetite and then your weight management. Your thyroid hormones, again, something we're all probably a little bit more familiar with, so T3 and T4, these help to control our metabolism and again, our energy levels. And then last but not least is melatonin, which is commonly known as our sleep hormone. It's there to help regulate your sleep and your wake cycle. So it's obviously there to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and feel rested. And melatonin is a key recovery and overall well-being hormone. All right, before we jump into sort of optimizing all of these hormones, something I want to cover with you is something called the hormone hierarchy. Now, as you can see there, it kind of looks like the food pyramid. And when I'm thinking about optimizing hormones or harmonizing people's hormones, we want to start with, like the food pyramid, the base, then work our way up to the middle, and then lastly, the top. So, these hormones will probably look a little bit different to what you would imagine we'd work on first. So let's jump in with the first one, cortisol. So as we've talked about, cortisol is our stress hormone. This is one of the first things that we look at if we're trying to harmonize our hormones. Then we're going to look at insulin because our blood sugar regulation, again, is super important for making sure that everything else is working in harmony. And then, of course, that lesser known hormone, leptin. Now, all of these are along the baseline because essentially our body is constantly living in, are we in survival or are we safe? If we're stressed or if we don't have enough food on board, which is where this insulin and these leptin hormones come in, we're going to get the signal that, hey, everything is off kilter and basically there's havoc or dysregulation in amongst our hormones. So we always start with these key ones at the bottom. Then we move on and we look at our melatonin and our thyroid hormones. So obviously, once we know that we can survive, that there's no saber-toothed tiger chasing us, and once we know we've got some food, sleep and rest and recovery is really important, and our metabolism, regulating our hunger, but also regulating our energy levels and all of that kind of thing is a lot more relevant as well. And that's where melatonin and our thyroid hormones step in. Then lastly, which is generally where lots of people will go first because that's where we get most of the symptoms, is our sex hormones. So what we usually do is the baseline, work to the middle, and then we look at the sex hormones and probably, and I might be being generous here, but maybe 90% of the time when I'm working with clients, as soon as we get these baseline ones sorted, pretty much everything else falls back into place. So sometimes there are a few things that we do need to optimize melatonin, your thyroid hormones, and maybe even a few tweaks in terms of your sex hormones. But basically, if you're getting this bottom piece right, everything else is pretty much set to go from there. So what does harmonizing these hormones actually look like in real life? To show you that, I am going to take you through a day in the life of most women, and there's no judgment here in any of this, versus a day in the life of a woman living in harmony with her hormones. So, morning routine for most women. We usually wake up to an alarm. It's now getting darker, unfortunately, in the mornings. We will turn on some bright lights. Maybe we'll look at our phone, perhaps scroll on social media or check our emails. Get up, we make a coffee, we head out to an exercise class or go for a run or do a workout at home. And then we rush around to get ourselves, our kids, all of those kinds of things ready. And amongst adding 500 loads of washing to the washing machine as we go and maybe doing other tasks. In the middle of all that, we usually will eat something, and that usually consists of maybe a smoothie because it's quick and easy and on the go. Maybe it's something like oats and granola, or at best, an egg or two on toast. Or we skip breakfast because we've heard, hey, intermittent fasting is great for you, right? Let's just like forget that altogether, save myself some time. So, morning routine for most women. The hormones this messes up are cortisol, leptin, insulin, melatonin, and our sex hormones, believe it or not. So, the morning routine of a harmonious woman is waking up naturally. So, our circadian rhythm is already set, meaning we don't need to have an alarm clock because our body clocks are always already in alignment. Our first light exposure, rather than it being our phone or a screen, is natural light from the sunrise for about 5 to 15 minutes. We would ground by walking on the grass, the concrete, or on the sand with our bare feet. We'd hydrate before we have anything else, including our coffee, with water or maybe even with electrolytes. And then we would eat breakfast with 20 to 30 grams of bioavailable protein and fat before having any caffeine or with our caffeine. So, how this optimizes our hormones compared to our previous day in the life. So that morning sunlight in amongst the grounding that we're doing gives our body the correct signals to turn off melatonin, which is our sleepy hormone, and to turn on cortisol. We actually want our cortisol to rise in the morning, so this is a really good thing. Our sunlight exposure also cues our mitochondria, which is the little powerhouses in our cell, to make something called pregnenolone. That is the precursor to all of your sex hormones, your progesterone, your estrogen, and your testosterone. Then dehydration obviously can disrupt your energy production via our mitochondria. So hydrating adequately by either having some water first or some electrolytes will support your energy levels. And lastly, eating a breakfast with protein and fat stabilizes your blood sugar levels, optimizing your insulin, optimizing your cortisol, and preventing leptin resistance. So preventing that stored energy on your body and your brain to stop communicating effectively. Okay, the daytime routine for most women. The daytime routine for most women is obviously spending a lot of time indoors, either working or looking after children, spending a lot of time looking at our screens, a phone or a computer screen, sitting down a heap, or rushing around doing 101 million different things, and eating our lunch distracted, either scrolling on our phones or whilst working at our desk, or we just skip it all together because we are too busy. Yeah. So the hormones this messes up are unfortunately our cortisol, our thyroid, and our insulin. The normal routine or the daytime routine of a harmonious woman is this. She takes regular breaks away from her phone or from her computer screen. It only needs to be for a minute or two, ideally stepping outside and getting some natural light into your eyes if you can. Eating your lunch undistracted by your phone or by your work, so that means taking it away from your desk. And ideally, I guess a practical strategy I always say to people this, and people are like, I don't want to sit and eat in silence. I say put a podcast on. That Jackie's is obviously a really good one to do. That mimics kind of like this conversation, right, at the table. You're not, necessarily obviously speaking back, or maybe you are, but there's distraction, but we're not being distracted by like a video or scrolling or anything like that. So you can still do stuff. It's just ideally not having that screen in front of you. Yeah, or just, somewhere in nature is actually bliss. But if you find that you just get a little bit bored, that's totally fine. A podcast is a great idea. And then lastly, ideally, we want to utilize tools like a standing desk if we can. Take short walks. Maybe that again is like a loop around the office every 5 minutes, or a walk, for 5 minutes every hour, or a walk back and forth to the end of the driveway or something like that. or if you fancy, a walking pad to move your body, and again, organizing a day in a way that reduces the need to rush everywhere. So that's kind of for the people that are doing 101 million things all in the course of a day. How this optimizes our hormones. So those regular breaks away from our screens reinforces the circadian signaling and reminds our body what time of day it is, so it can optimize our insulin and our leptin hormones. Not skipping lunch means that we stabilize our blood sugar levels, which supports cortisol and insulin and ensures we don't get that 3 p.m. energy crash where we reach for caffeine, or chocolate, or something else yummy. And then eating lunch, not scrolling on our phone or sitting at our desks as we're typing away, ensures that we're supporting our digestion, which optimizes our thyroid hormones by making sure we've got enough nutrients on board for their conversion, and that our liver and our gut are in a state that they can complete the conversion. Okay, evening routine for most women. We arrive home from work or get to the end of the day tired, exhausted, knackered. Feels that she needs to de-stress with a glass of wine. Eats dinner quite late, so within sort of like that 3 hours of going to bed window, and often this can be in front of the TV. Scrolls on her phone, gets on her computer to do work or watches TV for a couple of hours, gets a second wind, and then decides to do dishes, washing, clean the house, and then decides after all that it's time to go to bed and that she should get some sleep. But she takes her phone with her to bed and doom scrolls while she's in bed. So the hormones this messes up are your cortisol, your leptin, your insulin, and your melatonin, of course. So, an evening routine for the harmonious woman. She arrives home from work or from doing all of the things with the kids with enough energy to cook dinner and has no cravings for alcohol. This doesn't mean she can't enjoy a glass of wine if she really wants to, but she doesn't feel like she needs it. She eats dinner with at least 3 hours gap between actually going to bed. She might go for a short walk after dinner, or spend some time outside, maybe even watching the sunset. If she's using her phone or having to work on her computer, because I understand that that sometimes is the reality, she blocks the blue light exposure she's getting from those devices with either glasses or some red light filters. And then she winds down for bed by not doom scrolling on her phone, by either chatting or connecting with her partner in all of the different ways that I'll let your mind run wild there, having a bath, doing yoga or some stretches, or even just reading a book. All right, so how this optimizes our hormones. Eating our dinner at least 3 hours before bed ensures that cortisol doesn't rise before trying to sleep. Because our food does raise our cortisol levels. So it ensures that your core body temperature can drop, which is actually what's needed for us to be able to get into restorative sleep and then, of course, into cellular repair. Watching sunset, one, just romanticizes your life, let's be honest, but it further cues our circadian signaling, which optimizes our melatonin production, reduces our cortisol levels, and sets us up for sleep so that we can rebalance leptin for our morning hunger signal. So really, really important for those people that wake up and they're just like, I'm just not hungry. If you're not doing all of these cues at night, you're not going to feel hungry in the morning. Then winding down without that blue light exposure into our eyes from our phones or from screens ensures that we're not signaling to the brain that it's daytime. So peak blue light is at midday. And if we are staring at our phone screens at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, it is telling our bodies that it is midday. So, because that is obviously when our blue light is abundant. So, blue light drives up our cortisol, it blocks our melatonin, and it can also drive our blood sugar up, which will disrupt our lectin and our insulin. So, you can get a blood sugar spike at nighttime without even eating anything, just from scrolling through your phone, believe it or not. All right. And then the monthly routine. I couldn't not include this. Obviously, we kind of run through the day, but as women, we know that we are cyclical beings and we cycle on a monthly routine as well as a daily routine. So, what that monthly routine looks like for most women is our nutrition and our movement look pretty much the same throughout the month. We don't really consider the cycle phases when we're planning events, deadlines, or work and life activities. And we expect that our mood, our productivity, and our creativity will be the same throughout the month. And the only period that we generally focus on is our period. So we don't really think about any other phases. And the only other phase that we might consider is our ovulation. And that obviously becomes really relevant when we're trying to become pregnant. All right. The hormones that this messes up is obviously quite clear. That is our estrogen, our progesterone, and our testosterone, all of our sex hormones. So the monthly routine of a harmonious woman looks like adapting your nutrition and your exercise routine based on the phases of your cycle. Yes, even when you're perimenopausal, less so when you're menopausal, but it still counts. You can still cycle sync and adapt your nutrition and your exercise routine. Understanding that our creativity, our productivity, and our moods will fluctuate throughout the month, and using these fluctuations to guide what you plan and what you get done. Now, I know we all kind of get that because we know that we change on a daily basis, but I don't think, or most women I work with don't use that to your advantage. We just kind of treat our moods, our productivity, and our creativity like it just happens on a whim. But once you actually start to look at your monthly routine, if you're working in harmony with these things, you'll see really clear patterns start to emerge. And that's when you can actually use these things to your advantage. And then obviously this harmonious woman knows that her cycle is more than just her period and ovulation, and she optimizes her hormones at each phase. So let's talk about how this actually happens. Estrogen has an appetite suppressing effect, which means we are usually less hungry in the first half of our cycle. And in the second half of our cycle, you're more insulin resistant. So we're more prone to blood sugar imbalance, which can affect our energy and our mood. Being aware of this means that we can make subtle changes to our nutrition to support our hormones. Understanding the impact of our sex hormones, understanding the impact our sex hormones have on our productivity, our creativity, and our energy means that you can support your needs at each phase of your cycle. For example, more creative in our follicular phase is generally the trend, more outgoing at ovulation, and then more productive, more get shit done mode in our luteal phase. And obviously I haven't put in our period, but we all generally know how we feel there, and it is introspective, a time for really kind of resting and having some time for ourselves. Okay, the foundations to add to your routine, right? Because that's a lot of information, and I want you to have some takeaways to actually start to implement. So get outside as soon as you wake up, ideally with bare feet, so you get that grounding as well. And you want to face east towards the sun. Now, a lot of people say to me, oh, there's buildings in the way or the trees or anything like that. This isn't sort of, you know, the be all and end all. If you can face towards kind of where the sun is rising, it is obviously optimal, but just getting outside into that light and getting that exposure into your eyes will support proper signaling of all of your hormones, because we've got an aligned circadian rhythm. Our body knows exactly where it is in time and space, and therefore sets all of the other hormone processes off into place. Do not skip breakfast. I know intermittent fasting is a big thing, and I'm definitely not against intermittent fasting or fasting in general, but the way that everyone does it with skipping breakfast is going to disrupt your hormones. So please don't skip breakfast, and make sure that you prioritize protein and fat at your breakfast. So thinking more savory rather than sweet, and also have your caffeine either with or after you've eaten. This will support your blood sugar levels, your insulin, and it will ensure that you don't drive up cortisol. So I obviously mentioned that we do want cortisol rising in the morning, but when we fast by skipping breakfast, it just shoots up and up and up, and that's when we get the crash later in the day. Take the time. This is so important to actually sit down and eat your meal. So ideally, we want to be eating in a parasympathetic nervous system state. What does that mean? Our rest and digest state. A really simple and easy way to get into that is your breath. So just blocking everything out for 2 seconds, closing your mouth and taking 3 to 5 deep breaths in through your nose, ideally extending your sort of exhale so it's a little bit longer than your inhale. That will allow you to tap into this parasympathetic nervous system state. So couple of deep breaths. Then when you're eating, chew your food. Super important for optimal digestion. And again, we're thinking, okay, we want to take the pressure off our whole digestive system, but we also need all of the nutrients from our food for our liver and our gut health to convert our thyroid hormones. So if we're not chewing our food and we are disrupting all of our digestive process, we again will disrupt thyroid hormones. Then what I want you to focus on is eating your dinner at least 3 hours before bed. Now, yes, I know we are losing sort of like daylight hours. So yeah, that means that your dinner will come sort of closer and closer towards, 4, 5 o'clock. And that is totally fine. If you are into fasting and all of those kinds of things, at that point in the day where you can look at skipping meals. So skipping dinner rather than breakfast is optimal for your health. But while we've still got some longer days, eating your dinner at least 3 hours before bed and blocking blue light as soon as the sun goes down by wearing blue light blocking glasses, turning your phone screen, your computer screen, and your TV screen either really dim or on red, and there are some ways to do that. Dimming the lights, or you can even get red light bulbs as well. This obviously will support your melatonin, your leptin, and your cortisol. And then lastly, learning about the phases of your cycle, wherever you're at in terms of your hormone journey, whether that is still menstruating, perimenopausal, or even postmenopausal. It obviously looks slightly different because you no longer have a cycle, but you are still a woman and a cyclical being, so you can still lean into these kinds of practices. Learning about those phases and implementing nutrition, exercise, and a self-care routine that supports your hormones for the phase you're in will start to support your sex hormones. So you can see we've kind of got like a morning or a couple of morning ones, a midday, and then a dinner, and then a monthly foundation to add to your routine. All right, this is the thing that I always want you to remember about your hormones, and that is that they are chemical messages, not root causes. So there's a lot of talk about, hey, your hormones do this, that, and the rest of it. It's not true. Like, they are not the root cause, they are just the messenger. So the more you prioritize the foundations that we've talked about today, the less you will ever have to worry about balancing your hormones. And yes, this is true even through perimenopause and obviously into those early stages of menopause. Your body knows what to do. It is just responding to the environment it is exposed to. And when something in that environment is off, your body will respond in the form of symptoms. So it's just your communication, your body's way of communicating to you. All right. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. I know that was a lot of information. So I have left, hopefully, a wee bit of time for any questions if anybody has any.
I've got lots.
Go for it.
Yeah. So I guess first of all, just to explain to everyone, I've done my nutrigenomics test with Aubrey. So I've actually got back my personalised um, hormone journey, and is that what I would call it? Personal hormone DNA?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So your
Yeah.
personalized, your genetic profile reports are what
Yes.
they are.
I've got
Yeah.
my blueprint. So I'm pretty
Yeah.
familiar with that, and it's super empowering. I totally recommend it. But I thought a couple of things I'd love what you shared with me, which I found really super interesting, was around the leptin.
Mhm.
And because I was that woman, like I was skipping breakfast and I was on the phone and I was busy and then once I actually learned about the leptin, which I'd never heard of, that really did actually change my morning routine. And I just wonder if you might be able to tease the leptin out a little bit for everybody to hear about.
Yeah. So your leptin, like I said, it's something that people don't usually hear about, and you actually can test it in blood work. But tried to find somewhere in New Zealand that does it, and unfortunately, there isn't anywhere. A lot of you can get it done in the States and sort of other places, but we don't test for it here. I think it will eventually come. And what it is, as I said, your sort of fat storage hormone. So it usually will dock at night in terms of into the leptin receptors. And what Jackie's referring to is with leptin, and when you get your genetic test results back, which Jackie's got, is that some people can have sort of a suboptimal leptin receptor, meaning that that hormone to actually dock into the leptin receptor, it doesn't work as well. And so it's even more important for those people to be doing all of these kinds of practices, obviously.
Yeah.
But what it actually does is at night it says, okay, great, body and brain communication. How much fat do I have on my body? And when we're not getting that optimal signaling from leptin, we can either have disrupted sort of leptin signaling and leptin sort of docking. And so our bodies can say, hey, even though we might have a good amount of energy reserve on our bodies, so some good sort of fat stores somewhere, our brain can get the message that no, this person is in a full on famine. There's no food around. You need to slow her metabolism down. And you also might want to just kind of decrease her cravings or her hunger and all of that kind of thing, because we want, if we've got no food around, we want to increase that. So a lot of the time people will then get cravings for sugary foods, energy dense foods, and they kind of think, okay, maybe this is just like me, I'm not so great, and it's willpower, and it's all of those horrible things that we say to ourselves, when in actual fact it's just our body saying, you don't have enough energy reserve, you're in a famine, and it is constantly going to send the message to you, get some food, get some food. And
Mm.
meanwhile, we're saying, I don't need any more food. I actually want to lose a couple of kilos. And so what are we doing? We don't get the food. And then we're thinking all of the signaling is, as I said, just a lack of willpower or some other kind of story that we've told ourselves. And it's simply not true. It's just, as I talked about, this environmental cue being a little bit off balance.
Mm.
Does
Yeah.
that explain?
Yeah, it does.
Is it a little
And
bit
for
complex?
me, I know for me, my call to action was to actually eat, was to definitely eat some protein sort of quite soon after I woke. So that's been and I've seen a shift in energy with doing that. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. And then I also was going to mention, and Bex has asked it, what's the best way to track our cycles when our cycles are no longer regular? And I've stopped cycling, so I'm in menopause. And as soon as that, like even through perimenopause, like I very much got in tune with the moon. So there's a new moon tomorrow, in fact. So new moon, traditionally when we lived in villages and we weren't exposed to all these outside influences, was when we bled, and the men would go off and hunt, and all the women would stay in community, and we would all bleed together. So for me, I know with this new moon that I will actually create some space for more rest, and more intention setting. And then traditionally, it was the full moon, that, it's bright, it's light. That's when we would ovulate. And so for me now, not being someone who has a cycle, that's where I'm like, right, okay, let's create some, I'm going to have some energy around there. And I've tried it. Like, I've been in menopause since August, and it's worked. And I really honor and diarise those two particular moon cycles.
Yeah, I completely agree. That
Yeah.
is exactly what I would, or what I do suggest to women, is exactly that. Follow the moon, and you will notice that. I guess that the only caveat I will say with people, I guess in that perimenopausal stage where, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I've got, my period again, and hold on, it's not, at the new moon. That's fine. Just reset, and, like, also honor your body symptoms as well. It's slightly different, obviously for you, Jackie, when you kind of know,
Mm.
okay, great, like I know I haven't had a
Yeah.
bleed for a certain amount of time, but for people that maybe it's just slightly extending out, that's fine. Run with the moon, and then when you do get your cycle, you get a bleed or something like that, or you feel a particular sort of way, like you might get those kind of cravings or those symptoms that you might get, like just before you bleed, we just honor those.
Mm.
So the moon is the easiest if you want something sort of tangible to kind of like grab onto and start tracking. But if your body has a different agenda, listen to it,
Yeah.
and go with those symptoms.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
good
going to
to
add.
really make note.
I'm going
Yeah.
to add to that perimenopausal journey too. It's more like a spiral. So rather than the fairly distinctive four different phases of the menstrual cycle, perimenopause is putting those four distinctive energies into a spiral. So it can be in a millisecond that you can experience all those energies. So that's where, the routine that you've talked about with the harmonious woman is so crucial. So we've kind of got our nervous system is regulated as much as possible. Yeah.
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 And like I talked about, it's those, our sex hormones are the things that we often look at, because they're the things that we, get a lot of symptoms and things, from. But it's that bottom piece, and that sort of hormone hierarchy that like those are our foundations that we really want to set. And then everything is kind of offset from that. So those are the focuses. And then, yeah, you kind of, like you say, once your nervous system is right, once your blood sugar and everything is right, like everything else is a little bit more sort of
Yeah.
harmonious on its own.
Yeah. And it's really empowering, like having worked with you. Like, I would have had that mindset of, oh, I'm useless, I'm hopeless, I can't lose weight, I can't maintain my weight. And then actually discovering what my genetic makeup is. And it was your words, but I totally agree. Like, I genetically am made up from warrior genes. So I would have come from women and men who were literally in the feast or famine era. And now we live in a world where it's feast. Um, I'm having to kind of rebuild how what works for me, and that's what's been beautiful with working with you. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, completely agree. And that is the thing. The nicest thing about getting your blueprint, getting your genetic report is, like you say, it's kind of, it takes away, and I'll use this again, another example for another woman I had who it constantly, like unfortunately most women, being, fluctuated in weight throughout her entire lifetime. And we looked at a lot of her hunger hormones. We looked at the way she was set up in terms of her blueprint. And the great thing about it is, okay, once I've got this, I know what I need to do to like change my genetic expression, or what I can do to actually kind of like optimize all these things. And it's the most simple change that we made for her, but she was just like, this is absolute game changer. And it was that she didn't have the same satiety signaling that other people would have, right? So her hunger hormones, literally, that's, when your body knows that it's full, is a hormone going out to your brain to say, great, full, shut off that hunger now. And hers was, she had this suboptimal kind of version of that. So it took her a little bit longer. I just said to her, look, for a week, do not go up and get seconds and those kinds of things. Just have a balanced plate, and then give yourself 15 minutes before you go and have any more food. Go and have it after 15 minutes. Go and eat it if you want. But just give yourself a break. And she came back the next week and was fizzing. She was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe, like, it can't be that simple. And she was
Yeah.
just like, it's so made my life so much easier, because what she was doing a lot of the time was having seconds or nibbling on bits and pieces and then feeling terrible afterwards, because she'd be bloated and full and being like, oh, I just feel gross. And she
Yeah.
knew, like, I'm overeating, but she couldn't work out why. She's like, but I'm still hungry. I don't understand why I feel so full. I needed more food. And it was like, you just need to give that, your hunger cues are disrupted, and you just need to give yourself more time. And she was just like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it's very cool to find those kinds of things out about yourself, because like I probably said to you, if you can give yourself grace and not then think it is some kind of a flaw, it's just the way that you're made up, and that is perfectly fine.
Yeah. And that's what came out of my blueprint, was my satiety is slow. So I do have to stop and pause and see if I do need more. And it also came out that I actually need not a lot of food. So I was sort of, yeah, so I've seen a real shift in what I actually serve myself as well. Yeah. Just really conscious. Yeah. It's good. It's good. We've got another question there. Can you see that, Aubrey, or do you want me to read it?
Sorry, I'm not keeping up with these. Let's
So
see.
I'm wondering if being more harmonious would help libido. Mine seems to have fallen off a cliff.
Yes, 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 without a doubt. Um, Let me, I guess, bring this into context, right? If your body is, if cortisol is quite often high, which unfortunately is really common in this day and age, you might experience that as just kind of rushing, or this dysregulated nervous system where you feel on a lot of the time, quite busy, have a full life. If you are living like that, chances are that you have got sort of this chronic stress going on, this chronic high cortisol. And when your body thinks that you are, and because I guess what cortisol is signaling again to our body is that we are in a state of fight or flight, right? There is something there that is threatening our life, and we need to deal with that. We need to fight it, or we need to run from it. Why would your body ever say, hey, just go off into that corner with that man over there and have sex, when we need to run from a tiger or fight off some kind of a threat, right? Like, our drive and our libido is simply not going to be there if our body thinks it's a life or death situation. So again, we need to come out of this like chronic sort of stress state. We need to tell our bodies it's safe. You've got all the resources you need. There's no famine. There's plenty of food around. Like, there's no tigers or any crazy stuff that is going to take our life. And then you just magically might decide that, hey, my husband looks pretty good, or my partner looks pretty good, or hey, I feel like I look pretty good. Going to go and self pleasure, or go have sex, or whatever it is that you're wanting to do. So of course, all of this will help libido. Yeah,
Mm.
for sure.
I certainly know, like I've just written down some notes again, um, definitely about the blue blocking, and definitely sitting down and eating the meals and that rest and digest. It did stick with me, so I have made a shift in that area. Um, but I just want to reflect back around how much we do blame the hormones. and it's the hormones that are they're our message. So it's not the hormones' fault. They're the message. Don't shoot the messenger. And just um, how little attention we do give to that cortisol and insulin and that leptin, and the melatonin and thyroid, like you mentioned, and how much we put onto those sex hormones. So that's really interesting. And I know for me, like, I've done some testing. I've got a lot of cortisol in me, even though I've done significant changes in my life. So if anyone else is experiencing that, they're welcome to reach out to me, because I've got some great support in that area. Um, and yeah, I guess I just wonder if we could end with Aubrey, if you could just share how people can find you.
Yeah, of course. So my website is just my name, so aubreynation.com, AubreyNation. And then same thing on Instagram. I'm just at Aubrey Nation. I am also on Facebook, but I'm not so great on there. So the best place for me is Instagram, but I think I'm on Facebook at Aubrey Nation Health, I believe.
Yeah, I think you are too. Or health, optimal health, I think. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Aubrey. We've done well with time, and thanks for everyone for tuning in.